A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. I have a guest here today who has impressed me very, very much. He's given me a very strong education, an education that's not only happening via the conscious mind, but especially the subconscious. And I'm so excited about him that I want to talk to him about the subject again, to simply give you the basic information again. Therefore, welcome, dear Josua Kohberg. Nice to have you here. Thanks for the invitation. With pleasure. Dear Joshua, you are a neuroscientist. Tell me briefly what a neuroscientist is and what they do. Sure, so neuroscientist is a very flexible term. There are different areas. I studied cognitive neuroscience, so the specific topic for me is if I direct any information to the human system, so to the brain, how exactly does the processing happen? And in that I have a special field. I've been dealing with the subject of hearing for over 20 years and have, let's say, rediscovered a channel. It's always been around, but I have technically rediscovered it, that people can hear through their skin. That's actually a very narrow area in which I work, but that's my area of expertise. And that's exactly what the University of Mainz documented. Some professor there, I don't remember the name, yes, Professor Schulhohen and Dr. Hens are our research partners in Mainz and Professor Kopp in Frankfurt. So we have several universities that we work with. And they actually prove that if you put information on your skin without me hearing it, you just put it on your skin, that it comes to the same brain area as via the voice over the ear. Exactly. There is a little trick to it. You can't put headphones on your skin, for example. We need an ultrasonic carrier frequency, maybe to explore a bit where it all came from. I intensively looked into the subject at the end of the 90s, and I got to it via a dolphin research project that took place back in the 1960s. And there it was found that a person who swims next to a dolphin, so the human head is above water, the dolphin is underwater, it makes clicking noises through its frontal plate. So basically it makes an ultrasonic sound through a bone reflection, and the person who is with their ears above water hears those clicking noises. And then they already figured out that it had to be some kind of listening path, which is alternative to the outer ear, because the ultrasound cannot be noticed from the outer inner ear. And so this whole project actually started for me to explore this, and then there were also other milestones that I built on. In 1991, Professor Lenhardt in the USA, he's one of the, let's say, founding fathers of cochlear implants, an ENT specialist. And he found out, for example, that you can use ultrasound to stimulate the auditory nerve directly. I started my research in 1997, and I really had an overview of all these combinations. They opened up to me to such an extent that it was clear that I can apply ultrasound to the skin by using contact vibration, and by that stimulate the auditory nerve through the skin. So today we are able to really process content, audio content, on the audio level throughout the day without having to use my ears. That means I can talk to you, I can drive, I can surf on the internet, I can work, whatever I want to do, and use my ears in everyday life, and at the same time I can process audio information, so language and mental training, frequencies for health. I can do all of that with it. So again, nice and slow, this technology transmits ultrasound, exactly, and something is modulated on this ultrasonic wave, what I would like to learn, exactly, and then I'm actually free, so I could now learn the Bible by heart and transfer it to my skin without listening to it, exactly. But I still hear it. So not in my ear, but I can actually hear it up here anyway. Exactly. So when you are in a very quiet room, when you have no outside noise, then you can actually hear what's going on. But the objective in using it is actually that you don't perceive anything, because you're hearing the engine of your car or talking to a colleague. So it really is a second auditory canal, which basically doubles your learning time. Well, I always use it at night. I sleep, I don't hear anything. The background noise is really down, so I can't even hear the noise anymore. I sleep perfectly and actually learn at night while sleeping. That is a small additional effect because the body is balanced. So we go via the nervous system, so the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems are balanced. And with it, for example, most people sleep better. We're all somehow always under stress in our civilization in which we live. And with that, I can easily find my balance. So a small, positive, well, not even that small. For many, it's a big positive side effect that I can sleep even better. I have to understand that more precisely now. How does the transmission not go to the auditory nerve? What increases my parasympathetic nervous system, so my relaxation mode? These are actually 3 different areas. Maybe I'll explain it separately from the point of view of the effect. So, you have to imagine it as follows. In order to convey an auditory impression, we need an ultrasonic carrier frequency. This is the first thing. And this ultrasonic carrier frequency has a very harmonizing effect on the body. So, maybe the viewers probably have also heard of dolphin therapies, for example. That means if I use such an ultrasonic frequency, it has to be a certain frequency spectrum, though. When I confront the body with it, it immediately begins to balance. It's just a nervous system activity. So that means if I'm extremely tense, very stressed, I would become calmer. So, let's take the example of a classic burnout patient who constantly drives in the red speed range, is totally overwrought, doesn't come to rest at all. They actually have the impression when they then work with a noose, they would be using sleeping pills because they can no longer evaluate the normal state of rest, of relaxation. Now, let's take the extreme counterexample with a person who's extremely deeply relaxed. Going towards depression, they would suddenly get more drive. So you can imagine it as follows. The Asians always talk about finding the center. That means when I look at my body as if it was a pendulum, then a slight movement in the middle would be optimal. Tension, relaxation, tension, relaxation. If I have a burnout patient, they're in a complete state of tension. If I have a depressed patient, they're completely in relaxation. So they have no energy to do anything. And both are just regulated by the ultrasonic carrier frequency. But I haven't even studied there, or I haven't recorded any audio content at all. It's just the ultrasound that we know from dolphin therapy. So a nice side effect. Exactly. Okay, good. Topic 2. Then you have something that a person wants to learn. Exactly. Let's say, for example, you were a wonderful example. You went to university and recorded all these lectures, but your professors audio-visually, and then you transferred them to your technology, transferred it through your skin, exactly, and then you knew it. Exactly. So I'll put it this way. I just saved about 80% of the study time. You have to look at it from the realistic side. If we want to learn something, we always need a conscious understanding. So if I had actually only passively received the content via my technology, so with the news, I would not have learnt the content. That means I sat in the lecture, I also really actively read the books, but on average, a student in this class spends about 30 to 35 hours per week with studying of the learning content. For me, it was about 6 to 8 hours a week on average. This is because I took it all in consciously. As I said, I attended the lectures and I read books. I really studied it, but then I simply received the same content over the skin for 15, 16 hours a day and heard it passively. That means I have unconsciously repeated over and over again what I once consciously understood. And our subconscious is actually the real force in learning. So I think the audience can understand that quite well. When we talk about topics such as sport or a job, if I learn a trade today, then at the beginning I have to think about everything. I'm doing an apprenticeship, someone comes and explains something to me, I'm under extreme pressure because I try to understand everything. And at some point the whole thing becomes automatic. After 3 years, 4 years, I'm doing the job faster, it becomes easier, and I don't even think think about it anymore, a so-called unconscious competence. And that's how it is with every learning content. I'll start at the point I know I don't know something, so I'll start studying. I want to study neuroscience. I know that I don't know my way around, so I decide to study. Then I turn it into a conscious competence. So I learn things consciously. I understand them too, but I still can't use them because I haven't repeated them often enough. And now, hearing through the skin comes into play, because I very, very easily build up the high repetition rate while learning. One example just comes to mind. If there's a new song on the radio, and you hear it again and again, and at some point after the 10th time, it's such a great song, it's a catchy tune, suddenly I sing along with the lyrics. I never read the lyrics, I never looked at them, and yet I know them because the repetition was there. So it's about the same. About the same, exactly. Now, the link again. You say you have read the course. So another example, I'm reading lesson 1 of a German course. I read it, I see these German words, and also the meaning in English. I have the link now, don't I? Exactly, yes. Good, and now this lesson 1, which I've linked in consciousness, will be transmitted to me in the subconscious how many times per night? So in a language course, for example, we're talking about 800 to 1,000 repetitions within 8 hours of a language course. No way. Exactly, and that's what brings the power. But that's not actually that surprising at all. It sounds a lot, 800 repetitions. But if I now look at a daily routine for a newborn child, for example, then spread throughout the day, it also has a hearing impression of the mother tongue. Now for us it's English, then it just hears English over and over and over again. And that's how it goes, like you just mentioned the song on the radio. You just have to keep hearing it. And it's actually very simple from a neuroscientific point of view. I can't speak or reproduce anything that I haven't heard a few times before. This is the only way to develop competence in speaking, for example. And it's the same for learning content. If I don't hear it, if I don't link it, I will never get a competence in it. That's why a lot of people say, I'm forgetful. I only remember 5% of what I ever learnt at school. However, this isn't because the human being is, as such, is forgetful, but they simply have never repeated it again. And our brain is the highest energy consumer in our body. The brain, when we work really hard, cognitively, our brain consumes 70–80% of the energy volume. And if we just look at it pragmatically, it doesn't make sense to spend energy on something that I don't use. That's why we just forget it again. Those annoying repetitive effects. When I used to learn a language and repeat it over and over, repeat it, all the vocabulary and verbs and so on, and repeat, at some point it will work. And yet it still has not been repeated enough, because if I don't need it for a year, it's gone again. Exactly. And I can actually change that. So if I hear lesson 1 800 times in French and German, and then lesson 2 on the second day, and then on the third day, then I can actually go through this lesson in connection with the conscious connection, and it stays in my head. Yeah, and even with a language, to put it very practically, you also save 80% of the learning time. So if you go to school in the classic way, or evening school, then you have 4 to 5 years to get to such a vacation level of the language, but really have to work a lot. So we're talking, well, 300 hours, plus listening to it casually and so on. With our technology, we talk, about 40 to 50 hours of active learning. Everything's backed up by an expert, so we really verified it all. This means that instead of 300 hours, you have 40 hours of active learning time. But within 3 months, you do 600 to 700 hours of passive listening with the Neos. So that means these 600, 700 hours don't cost you any time because you work or you drive. But you learn passively, and then you only have to study actively for 40 to 50 hours. And after 3 months, you're on the same language level as after 5 school years. That's fascinating. The University of Mainz also tested that on students, and they reached levels there too after 3 months, I think. Exactly, what they would usually have in 2 years of study. So there they have 4 semesters of Spanish, for example, and about 300 hours of active training in those 2 years, or 4 semesters. And they did that in less than 30 hours on average. I mean, I'm a big fan of learning, but not necessarily only from school material, but also from things that really get us somewhere in life. For example, you transferred your studies. How do you manage that your studies then repeat 800 times during the night? So it's not that I need this extreme repetition rate, because when I was studying it was over 2.5 years, and there I actually just recorded audio files with my smartphone. I have a dictation machine on it. And then I always made a summary of my learning material. So I had, for example, 200 A4 pages. I worked through them consciously and compressed them down to about 10 pages, just key points to understand the essences, so what was important for me. And I recorded these 10 pages. I copied the whole thing to News and I played that for 2 months. So that brings me to, I guess, an average of about almost 10,000 repetitions over those 2 months. And also, quite interesting, I briefly mentioned how little time I spent. I graduated with a 1.7, so I was one of the best of the year, even though I invested significantly less time than everyone else. Can you explain the following to me? 800 repetitions of French Lesson 1. If I go through Lesson 1, I maybe need half an hour. How can that be repeated 800 times in one night? So this actually came about over the last few years. We started to research how receptive the subconscious is. So we basically played content and checked it afterwards. So we did multiple choice questions and so on. And that's when we figured out that you can perceive the same content up to 30 times, and that can actually be doubled or multiplied 30 times in speed. And we have developed a very, very exciting concept. We work with frequency shifts, with phase shifts. In other words, a customer who buys such a language course from us, for example, actually listens 30 times at the same time to the same information, prepared a little differently. You have to imagine it like that, to make it a bit transparent, because it sounds so crazy. You have to imagine it as if you were sitting in the beer garden, and we both talk. 40 people are sitting around us, so we hear them, but we don't consciously process it. We get the speech melody, we get the sound, we get all of this from these 40 people at the same time. And that was exactly the approach. So this idea actually came to me in a beer garden, because I thought that I actually perceive everything. Now, you would have to verify that. Then we did that. And in fact, within 9 months, I had finished developing the technology that you can hear 30 times at the same time. So super exciting. And with that, you actually have the ultrasound as the carrier frequency, then the audio file, and this audio file in different frequency bands is modulated on the ultrasound. Exactly, that's modulated on top. That's the technology. And if I get this information now, well, I'm using it, I'll tell you the result later. You can sleep at night without any problems, you can't hear anything. It doesn't bother me in any way. Lesson 1, French, goes into my subconscious and I don't notice anything. You know, I used to dream that I could just put these stupid books under the pillow, put my head on it and sleep on top of it. This is no longer science fiction. No, it's actually real. And I go one step further, actually. What most people just don't know because they never bothered with it, the state of science today, is that our brain works 24/7. So we do have phases of sleep where the body regulates itself, where we can measure changes in brain activity, for example. But in fact, at night while we sleep, our brain processes the information we take in during the day. And also a very exciting result from the last research, I think it's almost 7 years old now, the result from brain research, where it has been found out that on the unconscious level, we are actually receptive to an unlimited extent. Consciously, we always have the limiting factor of our sense organs, but unconsciously, we actually have no limitation as far as the intake of information is concerned. And it's true what was said hundreds of years ago. If you learn or read something just before falling asleep, it's easier to memorize it. It really is, because that's what is having after effects in the night. We've now just put one thing on top and keep working on the auditory nerve all night. And with it, I process the information, heard from outside, even while sleeping. What wouldn't work over the ear? But it works with our technology. I saw a really stupid movie last night, so I went to bed and then it haunted me all night. So you shouldn't watch stupid films just before going to bed. Really not, but really watch nice things or learn something. Integrate positive content into life. So if I work a little at night, my subconscious works at night. I don't disturb my deep sleep phase or the REM phase, which is so incredibly important for my health. No, on the contrary. 3.5 years ago, I realized we have a lot of customers who sleep better by using News. And then with the University of Mainz, really one of our standard partners, we initiated a very large sleep study because, of course, I also wanted to know more. As a scientist, you have to always measure. So that means you always need some kind of data set that you can compare. And for me, the measure of all things are EEG measurements to measure brain activity. And in the sleep study, we found that the so-called sleep architecture, that's not my area of expertise, I only familiarised myself with it because I then developed a complete training program for it. The sleep architecture for almost all Europeans or Americans, so those who live in a classically civilised environment, is disturbed. Through radio waves, through stress at work, relationship issues, all these kinds of things. Then we watch TV very often in the evening, have that blue light that simulates our brains. It would still be day. Then we go to bed, want to sleep after a minute, of course. That's not possible. So there are a lot of areas. And here again, the ultrasound carrier frequency of the News is actually the key to the game, because I use it to balance the autonomic nervous system, and with that I restore the sleep architecture. And as I said, we made this large study. I also wrote a book on it, very exciting topic, because sleep problems are usually viewed very one-sidedly by most people. So someone has mental stress and says, my sleep problems come from thinking too much. The second says, I have physical stress, so it's physical, and so on. But in fact, it's always a unit of body, mind, and soul. This means that if I harmonise the three areas, then I automatically have better sleep behaviour. And I can also take up learning content on the side. So that means we really have a huge advantage by using the News, because it's non-invasive. I don't have any medication, it's just a balance, a harmonisation. What can I specifically learn with this assistive technology? What kind of programs or information? Are there any restrictions or not at all? So actually there are no restrictions. So the News, maybe you can see it here on my wrist. It has a USB interface here, and I can actually use everything I have as an audio file. That's the only limitation. So I have to have an audio track somehow. We now have language courses from our side, of course. I've published over 100 mental training courses as an author. This is all optimized for News. That means with these many repetitions. Exactly. And let's say if you want something of your own, then I only have one transmission. So in the night it's maybe 10 times the same lesson, instead of somehow 800 times due to the optimizations. Exactly, but many of our customers use this for mental training, for example, and simply have, for example, 5 sentences, so-called affirmations. And then, I don't know, I have this spoken text for 1 minute, so I have 60 repetitions per hour. Then when I have 10 hours of that, I have 600 repetitions, for example. And so I can actually use any audio content that I want to use. Children learn the multiplication tables. That's a very classic approach for us. Elementary school students, after 5 or 6 days, they know the multiplication tables by heart. So everything that I would like to anchor as knowledge, I need it as an audio file, then I can transfer it to the News. That means we could also put a device like this on the wrist of our children. And on the one hand they sleep better, and on the other hand they also learn something else during the day. What might cause difficulty in conscious learning, that's also a great story. When I can support the children who find something difficult and offer them something. Exactly. So, no restriction. You said languages, mental training. Is there somewhere you can read about all the possibilities there? Yeah, so I can find the complete overview on the website of my company. I also founded a company for the sale of news. That is COSIS, so just go to the website there. You'll also find all branches. As I said, we serve learning languages, mental training, but also health. One can use special frequency therapies, for example, to go into the area of health promotion. So really, the news is an all-rounder for the promotion of human life. That's what I'd like to call it. I think so too. That's why I've already spoken to clinics. They were totally open, immediately enthusiastic, are already starting with tests that you can, of course, give this to the patient in a clinic during a treatment phase. In my opinion, the door and gate will open because this type of technology goes into our subconscious. And we know, or I probably know through you, that all of our thoughts that we think daily, only 7% are conscious thoughts. Exactly. And the rest is unconscious. And we actually intervene here in this mainframe with things that we want that are good for us, that might give us self-confidence. Let us speak, perform, stand up on a stage and talk, give confidence, self-love, and we can shape all of these wonderful qualities that perhaps we may not have been given in the best possible way through our upbringing. Exactly. And always through a conscious decision in advance. So, for example, when you say self-love, I have to think beforehand, of course. So, with the training courses that we offer, I listen to a short audiobook. And from that, I make the decision and say, okay, I want to get a new attitude on the subject of self-love. I want to love myself more. I know why, and then I work with such a technology. And then it will be transmitted again 800 times overnight, and if I hear that every day, then at some point it will get anchored. So I really think it's a miracle, an absolute miracle. You briefly pointed to your watch earlier, so you don't have to imagine a mess of cables where I'm in a tube somewhere. Exactly, very easy to wear. I can take it off for a moment. This is what it looks like. And then here on the back you have the two pads that contact the skin. These are the vibrators. These are the vibrators, exactly. So not a battery, it looks like a battery. No, that's exactly what makes skin contact, and I actually wear it so inconspicuously, like you wear your watch now, for example. I just wear it in everyday life. And the ultrasound and the modulated information are transmitted via these two vibration transmitters. Exactly. You wear it during the day, so you're studying now. Yeah. I'm currently doing a mental training here, but there could also be a Spanish course or a German course or content from your studies. It doesn't matter. And I find that so incredible. You know, we're talking and on the other hand, Spanish is playing. And that such things are possible doesn't really surprise me. Man, is just really an unbelievable miracle that it works like that. And I think, especially in medicine, that would be my personal opinion, it just has to be established. This is basic. People know they will get well, or they know they are beautiful, they know they are a miracle, and they know they are divine, and so on. These things. Yes, exactly. Dear Josua, thank you very much for this interview, and I really wish you good luck. That all of this can be spread very widely, that people know about it, that this thing exists. You just have to have the chance to know that you could work with something like that. Thanks. Thank you. And you too, dear viewers. Thank you for watching. All the best. See you next time.